These are the new SLK Halo paddles from Selkirk, and after a week of playing with them, this is my first impression. I want to start off this video by saying that I am a sponsored Selkirk player. Selkirk is not paying me to make this video, and this is not a review of any sort. This is just my first impression and initial thoughts of the paddle. So just to make that clear, yeah. But with that out of the way, let's get right into my thoughts. So I received both of these paddles around a week ago. I got both the control paddle and the power paddle. The main difference between the two is that the control paddle is 16 millimeters thick, whereas the power paddle is 13 millimeters thick. That extra thickness just generally dampens the ball when you hit it, and you're able to control a little bit more while you lose just a little bit of power, and the same goes vice versa for the power paddle. I also got both paddles in the XL version, meaning that they have a longer handle than the other version, which is called the Max version. I'm not sure the exact dimension of these grips, but I just know that I personally like a longer handle, and that is why I opted for the XL shape. One interesting thing that I noticed right off of the bat with these paddles is on the control version, the handle is much thicker than the power version. It's hard to explain, but both of these handles are an octagon shape, and the handle on the control paddle is a fair bit wider and thicker than the one on the power paddle. Actually, I'm just gonna draw it for you so it's easier to understand. All right, yeah, so basically this is it. The control one is thicker than the power one. And honestly, I am not entirely sure why they didn't make both of these handles the same. I'm not a paddle engineer. I could be being stupid right now. I have no idea. All I know is that that is a very noticeable thing at the beginning, is the power version is thinner and the control version is much thicker. And for me personally, I like a very thick handle. On these normal paddles, I'll put like 3 overgrips on them. It's a lot, I know, but I had to put 5 overgrips on this power paddle just to make the handle the right thickness for me. So that should say something about how much thinner it is. It's very odd, I'm not sure why they did that, but I mean, once I put a bunch of overgrips on like I normally do, I didn't notice a huge difference. After weighing both of these paddles, they both came in at around 8.5 ounces, which is perfect for me. That's the paddle weight that I normally like. I don't like mine too heavy, I don't like mine too light, so 8.5 ounces is perfect. I didn't experiment at all with putting lead tape around the edges because I just generally don't use that much lead tape, and from the get-go, when I was hitting with both of these paddles, they actually felt pretty good without the extra weight. So yeah, both paddles are 8.5 ounces, perfect weight for me, and yeah. Now, to give a bit of context about this, I am coming from playing with the Power Air paddle, a very thin paddle with a ton of power and pop, and definitely not a huge amount of control. I use that paddle specifically because it benefits me a ton in hands battles, because I don't have to have a huge backswing and follow through to counterattack. I just have to tap the ball and it shoots off like a rocket. So going to both of these paddles, which are much softer than the Power Air, was definitely an interesting experience. When I went to go play with these paddles, the first one I used was the power version, and my initial thoughts were I really enjoyed it. It does feel very good. I'm definitely not getting nearly as much power as the Power Air, but that's to be expected. That paddle is extremely poppy. But the added control I get compared to the Power Air paddle is really nice. I felt like I could control my dinks a lot more. My shots were more fluid. It just generally felt much nicer in that control aspect. Another thing is with this carbon fiber face, which is extremely popular in pickleball. This is actually Selkirk's first official release of a carbon fiber face paddle. I'm definitely still getting a high amount of spin that most paddles are these days. I'm loving it. I can see the curve on the ball when I hit it. One thing for sure, the grit on this does not feel as significant as the grit on the Power Air. I am still getting a ton of spin with this, but I do feel like coming from the Power Air, that type of grit is still gripping the ball a bit more for me. But with any surface nowadays, especially these carbon fiber ones, I'm still getting a ton of spin, so losing out on just a couple hundred RPMs is not a big deal for me. Now, speaking of the carbon fiber face, other than the different spin texture than what I'm used to, it seems to give the paddle a certain feeling that is kind of hard to describe for me. They feel very solid. And I don't mean solid as in just like all around good. They feel solid, like a brick or a block of wood. They don't feel like they bend at all when they hit the ball. They don't feel like they vibrate that much. It just feels like I'm hitting it with a very solid material. That is definitely, for me, an interesting feeling at first, because I'm used to paddles that are very flexy and they bend and bounce a lot when you contact the ball. But these ones really just felt solid. I felt like I was swinging through each shot and I wasn't noticing any major vibrations when I hit the ball. And after playing with it for a while, I eventually got used to it, and I'm really liking the way that feels. It feels comfortable. I feel like I'm getting good shots with that. It's a really odd experience, but all I can say is that if you try these paddles, you will probably notice as well that they feel solid throughout the face. Now, going back to the power specific paddle, I really didn't feel like I was losing that much control. Especially for a power branded paddle, I felt like I was doing great with my control shots. Like my dinks and my drops felt really, really good with them. And that could just be due to me coming from a already extremely poppy paddle, so anything would feel soft compared to that. But for a power specific paddle, I would definitely say that you're not losing out on any control at all. I had a very easy time up at the kitchen. I wasn't popping up my dinks very much, and I just felt like I could really grip and control and maneuver the ball around where I wanted it to go. That being said, I do not think this paddle is soft. This is still absolutely a power paddle. I was able to put a ton of pace on this ball when I'm hitting it with this power paddle. I felt really, really good with it. My drives were dipping. I was getting a lot of speed. And definitely, while it is still good at control, it feels very, very powerful. It feels very, very poppy. It doesn't necessarily feel like bouncy or springy, because it does again feel very like solid, which is still a very hard thing to explain. But it felt poppy. The ball felt like it just bounced right off of this paddle, and I definitely didn't have any trouble whatsoever in my hands battles or with my putaways because of the extra pop that this power paddle gave me. Now, playing with the power version of the Halo for a while definitely was nice. I was starting to get used to the feel. It felt really, really good. But then I decided to switch to trying this control version. And man, it is surprisingly different for an extra 3 millimeters of thickness. The only way I can truly describe this paddle is it feels like a Vanguard. It feels like the original Vanguard paddles, and it has so much control and a still fair bit of power. It kind of feels dead at times, but not like in a bad way. I feel like I'm just getting so much control and so much just gracefulness with this paddle, if that's even the right word to use. But the only difference is it just feels like a Vanguard paddle with the extra spin because of this grit, and I love that. Personally, I absolutely loved the Vanguard line, and I really, really enjoyed playing with those. I could always get great control while I wasn't losing out on a ton of power. But this specifically, having that extra spin from the carbon fiber face, as well as the amount of control that it gave me, was outstanding. It was definitely weird transitioning from the power version to this control version, but even then I got used to this so quickly because it feels so forgiving. It just is a easy paddle to play with and an easy paddle to enjoy. Now again, I just want to remind you guys that this is my first impressions. This is not a review. I don't know anything about specs or really any of that stuff. Go watch the Pickleball Studio if you want to hear all about that. but this is just my personal experience and my thoughts, my initial thoughts. So you can take my word for it, you don't have to, but I'm not being super scientific in my testing. I'm just going out and playing some rec games and seeing what I think. Now, personally, this SLK Halo, the control version versus the power version, I felt like I could get just a bit more spin. I feel like the ball kind of went into the paddle further just because of how much softer it was, and that allowed me to get a lot more friction and spin on the ball, and that was very nice. It's still not as close to the spin I'm getting on a Power Air 002, 003, that type of grit, but I definitely felt like I was getting a noticeable amount more than the power version. And again, it was just noticeable. It wasn't a huge difference. I could just feel like a little bit more spin coming from this one. My one downside that I would say with this is that while I really do enjoy the control that it gave me up at the kitchen when I was getting into hands battles and stuff like that, I definitely noticed that my counterattacks were weaker than they were with the power. I felt like I had to swing a little bit more and try to force more action onto the ball to make it pop, and especially at my level where realistically the ball is going really, really fast and I don't have much time to have these huge swings, that's definitely a issue for me. I don't think for many players that's a deal breaker. Like, again, I still had a totally fine time playing with this paddle and I enjoyed using it. I just don't think for my playstyle personally it is beneficial because I had to have much more momentum and movement when using this control version to get the counterattacks that I'm used to with the power version. One thing I've really discovered with power versus control paddles is that when I'm using a power paddle, I feel like I don't have to use as much effort or energy while playing, and that is very nice, especially when I'm playing for hours at a time. The ball just bouncing off the paddle just a little bit faster and with a little less swing saves me a lot of energy during these long winding points, and having that extra pop and just like ease of getting the ball over the net is very nice. I do think that for resets and stuff, obviously the control version is better because that's what it's for control. But for just sheer getting the ball back over the net and even like hitting the ball hard and all of that stuff, I think going with the power version of any paddle is just better. It's easier to get over the net because you don't have to put as much effort into it, and obviously getting the ball back over the net is the most important part, and so that's why I personally like the power versions more. But in this scenario, both of these paddles are very good. Again, I think this paddle, the control version, is amazing for everything, dinks, drives, all of that, but this one's just a little bit better with your drives, and I'm still not having a problem with dinks. And so generally 9 out of 10 times I'm gonna go with this one just because I'm getting more of an advantage on one type of shot, which is these fast, powerful shots, and I'm not really losing too much control. So I feel like I've really rambled on about both of these paddles. I've had a few things to say about both of them, and generally I know a lot of people just watch these videos to see which one's better, which one should I buy, and personally for me, I'm going to continue buying this power version just because of the reasons I've said. I feel like I'm not losing out on too much control or anything, but I also feel like I'm gaining a substantial amount of power on these shots that I need. Again, this is all personal preference. There's no scientific method whatsoever in this testing. I like this one more. Some people are gonna like this one more. Both are great paddles. I really liked playing with both of them, but this one personally is the one that I would recommend to most people, especially in today's game where it's just a lot of driving and fast shots. So yeah, there you have it. These are the SLK Halos, and that's my first impression. Both of these paddles are really good. I personally enjoy the power version more, but again, this is all down to personal preference, and I know some people are definitely gonna like the control version as well. Both of these paddles come in at a great price. They're very affordable, especially for pickleball paddles, and I think that's going to be a big seller for a lot of people. So definitely, if you see them at your local courts, if you want to get your hand on them, try them out, see what you think. I really do enjoy them, and I think a lot of people will as well. So that's it for this video. I know I don't do much with paddles here. Hopefully this video turns out okay. If you did enjoy it, please subscribe, like this video, leave a comment telling me what you'd like to see next. And as always, I really appreciate you guys watching. We'll see you in the next one, and bye.